Hey, everybody. Welcome to the best in true crime podcasting. This is True Crime Tuesday, and we've got a great interview lined up for you today. Now, I want to make a mention. You'll get the entire interview. The only segment of today's show you won't hear is our Dumb Crimes, Stupid Criminals. Why? Because that's under Stitcher Premium. We want to make sure that everybody gets a chance to hear these remarkable interviews of these incredible true crime stories. But for only $5 a month, you can subscribe to Stitcher Premium. That'll give you the entire episode. That includes the entire interview you're about to hear, plus Dumb Crimes, Stupid Criminals, and every episode of Darkness Radio, the best in paranormal podcasting. All 1,000+ episodes commercial free. And if that's still not enough reason for you to want to subscribe, you don't just get True Crime Tuesday and Darkness Radio, which, let's face it, for $5 a month, that's pretty valuable. You get every other show underneath the Stitcher umbrella. That means hundreds of thousands of hours of your favorite type of podcast programming commercial free. Nobody got time for commercials. So if you're interested, then make sure you go subscribe now to Stitcher Premium. Use code word Darkness Radio, all one word, Darkness Radio, for some deep discounts for an entire year's savings. Go do that right now. Take advantage of the special and be able to listen to Darkness Radio, True Crime Tuesday, and all of the other amazing programs across Stitcher's platform. Go subscribe right now. Sit back, relax, and enjoy this episode of True Crime Tuesday. Hello and welcome. You're tuned in to the best in true crime talk radio. This is True Crime Tuesday. I'm your host, Dave Schrader. Along with me, as always, Tim Dennis. Hello, Tim.
Hey there.
Got some dumb crimes, stupid criminals to discuss. Listen, there was a story that was sent to me that didn't really fall into the dumb crimes, stupid criminals, but I wanted to address it. We stray away from a lot of the stories that have to do with animal cruelty or things that happen to children. Mm-hmm. And I was a little perplexed as to why this person sent me this story, as I didn't feel it was a dumb crime, but it was this mom showed up at the hospital, asked two strangers to watch her daughter while she went to the restroom, and then handed one of the strangers her Social Security, or the little girl's Social Security card, and walked away. These happened to be two off-duty police officers. And the one took it and stood there and kind of watched, and the other one, as she started to walk down the hall, said, "Hey, you don't have to do this." Right? And she said, "Just leave me alone," and took off. She ended up being apprehended a little later, but she was on the precipice of losing everything. And instead of endangering her child out on the streets, she brought the child to a hospital. And, strangers might not have been the best way to handle this, but God love her, she didn't do something drastic like we've heard on the show all too many times and across the news.
Right, yeah.
So, folks, that's not a dumb crime nor a stupid criminal. That's a mother with compassion and empathy in her heart who tried to do the right thing in a desperate, plea. And we've said it on the show before. I'll say it again. If you are at a dark point in your life where you feel the only option you have is ending your children's lives in order for you to make it through, call me, email me, text me, whatever. I'll take your kids. They can live with me in perpetuity. I'll just keep them and take good care of them. And they'll have an Uncle Tim that'll be there to watch over them as well. But don't make drastic choices. Please, I beg of you. And I don't mind if I'm raising kids till I'm 95 if it means that their lives are spared. So thank God for this mother. But I believe you can contact most hospitals and drop off children or babies. You can drop off at a lot of fire stations as well. And I think they do it no questions asked. If you just say, I'm in a bad place and my child's not safe, and they'll do that. So please look into those options before you choose something much more desperate. That's all I can say.
Yeah.
All right. I don't mean to start on a downer, but man, I just want to approach that again because, the world's in pain and there's a lot of bad choices being made right now. And God, I'm so tired of seeing it,
Yeah.
It's heartbreaking,
heart-wrenching. Yeah. It's amazing how much pain, as you mentioned, the entire world is in right now. And it seems like people kind of throw their hands up and have no answers. And there needs to be, I think, just kind of a cleansing breath at one point, right. and more people reaching out to each other, and instead of throwing up their hands and saying, "Well, I don't have an answer for you." I think more people need to step in and help each other.
And trust me, don't take away your children's lives in order to placate your guilt because, that's just no way to live a life, and that's no way to take a life. Just please, turn these children over to somebody else. Like I said, dave@darknessradio.com, dave@darknessradio.com. Email me. Tim will take your kids. I'll take your kids. Just don't hurt them, please. For God's sake, stop hurting children. All right. Hey, I also want to mention coming up November, Tim, White Ribbon Day. I don't know if you're familiar with this. This is a time for men and boys to come together to stop the cycle of violence against women and girls. So please do that. I'll be wearing my ribbon during the last couple episodes of the show that I'm filming right now, showing my solidarity for that cause. And a White Ribbon is also for lung cancer, which my mom passed away from in November 5 years ago. So it's kind of a nice duality to it, and I'm glad to help represent both of these things. So with that in mind, let's lighten it up a little bit, Tim.
Yeah.
We've got an interesting guest joining us, not with one, but two books we're going to discuss. The book that came out in June, The Best New True Crime Stories, Well-Mannered Crooks, Rogues, and Criminals. We do have that in our true crime section at the Darkness Radio shop in the Amazon store. Also, The Best New True Crime Stories, Crimes of Passion, Obsession, and Revenge. That book is also available as of August of this year. And Mitzi, I have second-guessed myself now 3 times and getting ready to say your last name, even though we discussed it before the show. Mitzi Szereto?
Well,
Szereto. Szereto.
Szereto.
It's always the second option. These silent Z's and PFs and K's in your name just have to go, okay? That's the thing throwing me off.
Well, it's those fancy Hungarian names. What can I say?
Yeah, I guess was it like they're playing Wheel of Fortune, and the more money you have, the more letters you can buy for your name? Is that what it came out to?
No, well, I think the Zs were on sale, so
yeah.
For Hungarians and Poland, and they all, those Zs were on sale, and they grabbed them all up.
For any of you Americans not familiar with what a Z is, that is how most of the rest of the world refers to Z. So
Yes.
I'll catch you up. They're like, what the hell is a Z? Good stuff. Fascinating. I want to give a little background for you as well, Mitzi. You're an internationally acclaimed author, anthology editor of both fiction and nonfiction books, sprawling multiple genres. And those include, of course, the volumes of your true crime franchise, The Best New True Crime Stories, and The Best New True Crime Stories, Partners in Crime, Crimes of Passion, Obsession, Revenge, Well-Mannered Crooks, Rogues, and Criminals. Why the fascination with true crime?
Well, I didn't actually realize I was fascinated with true crime, and it just came about in a sort of a discussion with the former publisher that I had, who had gone to a new house. We were just brainstorming some ideas, and the true crime was something that we zoned in on as something, I'm going to go try this. And, I hadn't really thought about it much. And then I realized that, I've actually been, interested in true crime from childhood. I used to watch all those, those news magazine shows on television, which of course are still on. Now they're called true crime series, but then they were just news magazines. And realizing that, hey, I've been consuming this stuff for many, many years. And now here I'm just sort of doing it in print.
Well, let's start kind of more maybe into the dark category with your most recent book, The Best New True Crime Stories, Crimes of Passion, Obsession, and Revenge. Talk about some of your favorite stories from there. Then as we get closer to Dumb Crime, Stupid Criminals, a little later on in the program, we'll lighten it up with Well-Mannered Crooks, Rogues, and Criminals, and give a different perspective. But I'm just curious, when you're putting together anthology books like this, I mean, how do you sort through what stories you want to represent? And do you ever have crossover? You're like, boy, this would be good for this book and this book.
Well, I'll answer your second question first. That has happened. And there have been occasions where I've held back a story. I've technically rejected it for the book that I was presently working on, but saying, look, let me hang on to this because I'm considering doing this theme, and that could work really well. So I've actually done that where I've held on to something and it ended up in a later book. So, you just never know. And then, yes, there have been stories that could have gone in one of two books. So I just have to make a decision as far as what I've collected for one particular book, if that would, fill a gap that perhaps needed to be filled, or if I should just get it into another one.
Do you ever have readers of your books reach out to you to share stories kind of in those veins? Be like, hey, my dad or my uncle or I were involved in a crime like this, and kind of throw you leads as to finding some of these, more obscure and bizarre cases?
Not readers, but when apparently, when I put out a call for submissions, it goes all over the place. And I have been approached many times by people who have a story to tell. It's something that's happened to them, and they're not usually professional writers, and they're sort of hoping that I'm going to write their story, which is not how it works, really. Of course, there's always that issue of liability. You have to be really careful with things. But yes, I do get some really heartfelt messages from people, and they just want to get that story out there, and perhaps they felt that injustice was served or whatever. And I do have to turn them down for a number of reasons, one of which I've just mentioned, and that does pretty much happen with every single book. I'll be hearing from people in that regard.
Have you ever had somebody that was incarcerated end up hearing about you covering their story in a book? Has that ever caused problems for you?
No, but funny you mention that, because one of my earlier books, The Best New True Crime Stories, Small Towns, had a story in it about a cartel hitman. It was the story was written by Christian Cipollini, who you may know, and El Mano Negro, which is the hitman's moniker. He's incarcerated. I forgot if he's in the state pen in Texas or if he's in Florida, or they keep moving him around. So Kristen speaks with him because he's been trying to get his memoir published, or not memoir, but biography. And so I've got a photo of him, of the criminal in the book, with a copy of the book, and he seems quite happy with it.
Jeez. Well, that's a good sign, right? You don't want somebody that's got a reputation like that kind of looking for you.
It's so cute. I mean, there he is in his prison, garb, his orange or whatever, I forgot what color it was, and he's holding up the book. But no one, I've never had anybody else. And that's funny you mentioned that, because a friend of mine is a retired police lieutenant, and he was saying, I'm a little bit worried, you're kind of like, I love you like a sister, and I'm kind of worried this true crime is going to bring these people out of the woodwork.
Hilarious. Just so strange, right? Well, in looking at this, I mean, are there times where you're just like, oh my God, I could write a 1,000-page book because there are so many crimes that fit in this realm? Are there stories that you have to look at and you're like, ooh, that's a little too dark or twisted for even this book?
Yes, I have done that. I've actually, I've had stories submitted to me that I've just had to say, I'm not really comfortable with that. And I really don't want to include it. And I've also had to maybe get get a writer to tone things down a bit. Some things are just so horrible. You can't even write about them. They're so horrible. And you've got to kind of realize that, I don't want to sensationalize anything. I think that we have quite enough of the facts that people get the gist of it. And we don't need to be totally into crime porn, so to speak.
Right. Crime porn. Tim, that's just a reference. Don't get excited.
Oh, okay, sure. I won't.
Calm down.
That's right. Well, let's start to dig into some of the crimes of passion, obsession, and revenge. For people that might not really understand the true definition, what is a crime of passion considered? Is it always a sexually driven type of crime? How do we define it?
Well, that's probably the number one thing you think of, when it involves, emotions like, love or, sexual attraction or whatever. But there could be other things involved in it. It's obviously it's a crime committed at the height of some sort of an emotion driving you to commit the crime. Hatred could be a crime of passion. If you hate someone enough, that's a very powerful emotion. So, but in this particular book, we kind of go all over the place with the category, which is why I appended on there obsession and revenge. Some stories involve all three elements. Some stories may involve one of the elements or two of the elements, but there's it's sometimes a very thin line between all three of these things: passion, obsession, and revenge.
Do you find that is it true that in murder cases, really there's only three motivations: money, lust, and kind of revenge? Does that really kind of cover everything?
There's probably subcategories of that. I mean, power issues could be, oh God, you've got me on the spot here. It's just, there's the categories and there's subcategories. And it seems like every time you've maybe kind of ticked all the boxes, there's some new box that comes along. You know what I mean? It's just so wide open as far as reasons people might commit these murders. You could just be, for fun, no reason at all.
So are there a lot of those that are just would that be like more of a spree killing? Would that be when it's considered more for fun as opposed to, financial gain or sexual gratification?
Well, spree killings probably do come under the for fun category, but, funny you mentioned, actually I mentioned the for fun, didn't I? I guess because my brain is in that particular category, because I've just finished a book that's coming out after the new year, which is Partners in Crime. And there are some criminals in there. They're couples who are together. That's the partners, what I mean. And there are people who are just committing crimes for fun, murders for fun. That's just, unfortunate, but, it's as if you don't have enough to worry about as far as like being a victim for some reason, like in a crime of passion, then you have to worry about being just a random victim.
Yeah, it's a weird world we live in now. How many people I know, and a lot of them are law enforcement and military. I'll be like, where I'm currently stationed and filming this TV series, there were a few of the members of the crew. I'm like, hey, let's go see the new, Shang-Chi movie, or let's go see the new Halloween. And they were like, no, man, you wouldn't find me in a theater if my life depended on it because, of what's been going on. Or they're like, and then they tell me, make sure you sit in the last possible row. Keep your eyes open and everything. And I'm like, wow, are we really in a world like that now? And I guess we are. COVID's taken over the headlines for the last 2 years, but we forget how often really strange crimes that seem to fit no real pattern just occur in these shootings, these random attacks in public places. It's really kind of turned the world on its ear.
Yeah, it's pretty grim. I mean, I actually haven't been into a movie theater in a really long time. I'm happy. I've got my big screen television, and why would I bother? But I mean, that's a really scary point to think about, like to sit in the last row. That would not be like my first thing that I would think of if I were going to see a film at a theater. But it is unfortunate, and the United States seems to be number one in that regard. They want to be number one in the world. They certainly got that category down pat.
Yeah, that's an unfortunate win for them, or for us, I should say. Terrifying aspects of it. Well, let's start to dig into some of the cases. When you're reviewing this, what was, I know a lot of authors will have one piece that germinates that really kind of launches that book. What was that case or story for you with the best new true crime stories, crimes of passion, obsession, and revenge?
How do you mean launch?
Well, like I said, a lot of times the author will have in an anthology, they'll have stumbled upon one story that's kind of like, hey, wow. And then they start to build around that story. Was there one that was kind of the springboard for you for this entire book?
Not really, because, when I put out the call, I'll start, I have all my specifications and what I want, and I ask people for pitching a story. So that kind of gets me excited in the first instance when the pitch sounds like a really promising, interesting pitch. And of course, it's even more exciting if the writer has some sort of connection to the case. Perhaps they've covered it in their professional capacity if they're a journalist, or it's someone that they know that was involved in the particular case, or they had some personal involvement in another regard. So I'll have like a whole bunch of things that are kind of spinning around in my head about how the book is going to take shape. So it isn't really particularly one story. And stories come in at all different times as well. So, I mean, some people will get things in early, and then that'll kind of, if I know I've got like a winner straight away, that's an exciting thing to happen. But I can't say it's one particular story that does it. It's overall the whole thing with the pitches, and then that starts to formulate where I think the book what direction the book is going to take, what shape, what variety that we're going to have represented in the book. If that answers your question.
Sure, but let's dig in then. Give me a good story. What's one of your favorites from this book that stood out to you as you were researching it and delving into it?
Oh, well, the opening story is a real shocker one. That one is called I've Seen the Dead Come Alive, which is by Joe Turner, who's a British writer, and he's been in previous volumes. And he wrote about Psycho Sam, who you may have heard of, the young man who was involved in the horrorcore genre, which is sort of a horror rap type of musical form, and an online romance that began on the old MySpace. If anybody remembers MySpace, I guess MySpace still exists. I don't know. So it was a kind of an online romance with this teenage girl who lived out in Virginia, and Sam, Psycho Sam, whose name is actually Richard McCroskey, he lived in Southern California. And so this wonderful young romance was budding between these two individuals who were really they weren't really part of a lot of normal teen or young adult society, and they kind of found a connection through this horrorcore. So they finally met to go to a horrorcore festival. Psycho Sam flew out to the Eastern United States to meet this young lady and stay with her and her family for a couple of weeks. And it went really bad. The romance that was there online did not happen in person. There was just no chemistry. And this young man didn't take well.
Was it because the photograph that was posted was from 20 years ago? I remember the MySpace days.
No. I mean, he was still a young guy. I think he was like maybe 20-ish or something. I mean, so it's not one of those things where, the guy's like 30 years older than he claimed to be. It was just the impression that this young lady had of him, Emma. He was not the individual she expected. He was this sort of lumbering, clumsy, there was just nothing there. There was no spark. And I think probably anyone who's met people online and then met them in person, especially from a dating or romance perspective, has probably had that happen. Generally, though, it doesn't end in murders of several people, which is what happened in this story.
So does this rejection spin him off?
Pretty much so, yeah. Of course, there may have been something in his head anyways. I mean, in order to go to that level. Or
something missing from inside his head, yeah.
Exactly. It's not generally the average person's going to suddenly start murdering everybody because he's pissed off that, this chick doesn't like him back,
Right.
Not to make light of it, but I mean, it's a pretty heinous story. I mean, it's pretty horrific. I mean, the killings are just brutal and horrible. And it wasn't just the young lady who was his, the so-called love of his life, but it was her friend and her parents. Anyone who just came to the door, pretty much. And it's just horrendous. A really horrendous story. And a horrendous case, and a scary case, because you just don't know what's behind the mask, Well,
when you have somebody that obviously goes down that rabbit hole, once this kind of rejection kicks in, is it like, did it take a few days for him to brew about it?
Oh yeah, because initially he was Emma Niederbrock, who was the teenage girl in the story that was so-called involved with him. It was decided that Richard, or rather Psycho Sam, would fly out to Virginia to stay for 2 weeks, and then and this was under the parental supervision, because she lived with her mother, so it's not like they were shacked up somewhere. It was all, he was going to be in the guest room, and it was all very proper. No funny business going on. But it was like probably from the beginning he felt that the spark wasn't there. And then when they went to the festival, she was pretty much brushing him off the whole time. And it appears that she also copped off with some guy she met at the festival, and that didn't sit well with him.
Ooh, ouch.
Yeah. So obviously all this stuff was stewing, and then they're all stuck there for this 2 weeks, which I can't even imagine how uncomfortable that must have been for everyone.
Right. Yeah, boy, that's the equivalent of she's just not that into you, right?
Yeah, definitely.
God. Is this something, in his telling of it, did he seem remorseful or empathetic toward why he did these things? Or was it just, hey, listen, you don't treat me like this and not expect some kind of repercussions?
I think it doesn't sound like he was remotely, like it even affected him. Affected him. After he committed all the crimes, he actually, to make matters worse, he was staying in the house with these corpses. That is pretty out there, you have to admit. He was just staying there, and there's dead bodies in the house, and yeah. So he definitely had some parts of his brain not quite wired up properly. And then when he went on the run and he was caught, he just sort of, okay, and that was that. I don't believe there was any remorse expressed about what he did.
Now, looking back, do you know, in his life and career, do you think that this might not have been the first time he'd pulled something off like this?
It's really hard to say because, as I said, he was involved in the horrorcore genre, and he had these videos that he posted on MySpace, music videos, so to speak, and he'd be doing things like kicking over gravestones and things like that. Maybe that was just part of the persona that he was portraying, but that's a bit disturbing,
A bit disturbing. That might be a bit too easy on him. I don't know.
Well, I'm sure I don't want to diss the horrorcore genre in case there's any fans out there listening. I don't really know much about it, and it was the first I heard about it was through this story, and I did actually look online just to kind of get an idea of what it was, and it didn't float my boat. But I doubt the people involved in it are going out and committing mass killings. And yeah.
How did he get caught? What was you murder everybody, you're just kind of living there for a while. Did people start calling and stopping by looking for the family?
Oh yeah, people were calling and people were, stopping by, and he would be answering the phone like, oh, they're out to, they went to dinner, or oh, their car broke down. So apparently, what was the trigger was he'd apparently said something to another horrorcore artist that he'd done this, that he'd killed some people or whatever, and that kind of was like. That opened it up, and it was subsequently reported from there. And so he basically just went on the run. He took a car. He couldn't quite drive. I don't believe he really even knew how to drive. So he was weaving a bit, and ironically, he was stopped by a law enforcement officer for his driving and let go. And he just finally he managed to get his way to the airport. And by then it was pretty much all points bulletin for this guy. And there he was just sitting in the departure lounge, waiting for his flight. And he just went quietly.
Jeez. This reminds me, how weird is this, right? You talk about synchronicities. Today, as I was going through my Facebook memories, And maybe this is a good lesson for all of you out there that are teetering on that brink of thinking, if I get rejected, somebody's got to die. Just remember, please remember that rejection can be considered protection. It's the universe's way of keeping you safe from the wrong people, the wrong love, the wrong job, or the wrong friendship. So don't take rejection personally. Take it as a sign that this could have gone horribly bad for you. So murder doesn't have to be the outcome when somebody says no thank you or rejects you.
I think that's a really good point. I mean, we're always rejected. All through life, we're rejected. It's either, by a love interest or a job or a publisher. I mean, you're always going to be rejected. I have to reject people for, they send stories. I can't take every single story I have sent to me. I mean, I do hope no one's going to put a hit on me because of that. That's just the reality of the business. There's so much room in a book. I have to reject people.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, that was terrifying. What other tale would you like to share with us from that the brand new book, The Crimes of Passion, Obsession, and Revenge?
Well, actually, if you don't mind, I wouldn't mind sharing mine. I always, since I'm the boss, I put one of my own stories in the book. I know that I won't reject me. So that's kind of a given. But I mean, that's not to say that I take any shortcuts. I put a lot of effort into my stories. So I wrote a story. It's called Facebook Moored. This is also a relatively contemporary story from 2012. And this has elements of crimes of passion and obsession and revenge. All three boxes are ticked for this one. And this is about Facebook Moord translates in Dutch to the Facebook murder, which should tell you a little bit there.
Yeah, I think that kind of sells it right in the title. All right, what have we got?
Well, again, we're dealing with this, in this case, a bit younger than the previous. It's teenagers. And it's in this particular instance, it's in the Netherlands, and it's in the Chinese Dutch community. So we're talking a smaller. It's the Chinese Dutch are the largest, one of the largest communities, ethnic communities in the Netherlands. But obviously, it's a close knit community, and a lot of people know each other, and they have lots of events, and people are at these events. So it's as with any group of immigrants, they tend to be close knit and keep their ties with one another. So that adds another element to this, because it's just when you have someone in the community killing someone in the community, it's a real shock. It's even more of a shock. So in this case, it's a teenage girl, and she made a comment on a friend's Facebook post. And it wasn't a very nice comment, but look, who isn't guilty of doing that? Everybody does it. And, with social media, it's something that is used and abused. So she commented to her best friend. She just made a sort of essentially insinuating that her friend was being a bit slutty. And her friend took it very badly. And she basically obsessed about this comment.
Tim's the same way every time I say that about him online. I understand.
Tim is slutty too. Huh? Oh dear. So this friend who had the comment made just was getting angrier and angrier, and things were escalating on Facebook and back and forth. Threatening comments were being made. As I said, things were escalating to the point where even text messages were going back and forth. Threats against this Winsy is the teenager who made the comment, Winsy Howe, and escalating to the point where even Winsy's family members were being threatened. So what happened was Winsy's friend Polly, who was the quote victim, the Facebook comment victim, enlisted her boyfriend. It was a new relationship, and the boyfriend, Wesley, he wanted to do whatever he could to make his girlfriend happy. So it was the rage that his girlfriend was feeling had to obviously transfer over to him and became his to share. So they just decided something needed to be done about Winsey. So they decided to hire someone to kill her.
Yeah, that as one is wont to do when things don't go your way. Sure, let's just find a hitman.
Sure. I mean, doesn't every high school student do that?
Yeah. Oh, that was our right between prom and homecoming. There was that hitman weekend everybody tried to participate in, and then I think after that was senior ditch day, if I remember, Tim.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, yeah, and so I mean, it's almost it beggars belief because I mean, it's not like they went and found a professional hitman. There was this young hanger-on boy. Who kind of wanted to be one of the cool kids. He was trying to hang out with the older kids. So somehow they recruited him to do it. And, he wasn't, like I said, he was by no means a professional hitman or really any kind of, underworld character. It was just some kid in school. And he was up for it. And it's so ridiculous. I mean, they were offering him, they were kind of offering him money. They offered him booze. I mean, it was just like such a ridiculous amount of money that he finally agreed to do it, which probably makes the fact clear that he was doing it because he wanted to be in with this crowd and pump up his prestige, so to speak. Certainly wasn't any other reason. I mean, a little bit of booze and money wasn't enough motivating factor.
Well, maybe not for you, but as radio show hosts, sometimes you got to do what you got to do to make $20.
Well, yeah, I mean, the guy was 14 years old, and as I said, he was pretty much obsessed with hanging around with these older guys and being a tough guy. I mean, he would he just was really wanted to get in with these people. So, I mean, obviously, if you want to be a cool guy, it's like, hey, yeah, I'll go kill someone. And that's essentially what happened.
So he goes in and does this. I mean, obviously it did not go well. Was this a horribly botched murder, or what can you tell us about that aspect?
Well, not really. I mean, they were kind of trying to, go back and forth with when they were going to do it. I mean, they were having conversations on Skype, text message, etc. So, I mean, there was a digital trail of all this stuff. It's not as if it was, some hidden conversation in a back room somewhere. But yeah, ultimately it wasn't botched. It appears that the young man who was the killer was staking things out. I mean, he was told, where Winsey lived, descriptions of the house. So, he couldn't miss it. He'd never miss it. So it looks like he went over there and staked it out. Perhaps there was an instance where he was hoping to get the crime committed and it didn't happen that day. But yeah, he went over one day. He went to the front door. Winsey's father answered, and the kid asked to speak to Winsey, so the father left them alone to speak. And this kid takes out a knife and just starts stabbing and stabbing and stabbing her. The father heard his daughter cry out, and he came to see what was happening, and he ended up getting stabbed as well. The father survived. Winsey ended up in the hospital, and she did die 4 days later from the wounds. So yeah, the killing was successful.
How quickly after this murder takes place, though, is this kid caught?
Well, he was caught relatively quickly. I mean, he wasn't the brightest button in the box. I mean, he basically just ran off after he committed the stabbings, and he was found hiding in bushes or somewhere not very far away from the house. So the police found him hiding. So, he wasn't exactly a big brain as far as getting away from the scene of the crime. So he was.
Did people flip on him pretty quick, or was he trying to better his position in the courts by, selling out who hired him?
Yeah, that is essentially what happened, and then it escalated. Where the funny part is the big romance between Polly and Wesley started to disintegrate relatively quickly. Where with a lot of finger pointing after it became clear that, well, okay, Wesley hired me to kill, and then Wesley comes in and goes, well, yeah, but Polly, wanted this to happen, and so everybody's blaming everyone, and love is out the window when it looks like things are getting serious.
Unbelievable. Just tragic. Yeah. And what tips people over now? In that case, you have to wonder, in court systems here in America, right? There's entrapment. When you keep baiting someone over and over and over, and I know this has happened in a few cases with pedophiles, alleged pedophiles, where the government gets in their mind that this person may be bad, and they start sending them or spamming them email to pedophilia rings and websites, and these people will throw them out constantly. And then one day they just finally click the link, and that's all it took for them to get nailed. And obviously there was some kind of predilection toward it because they clicked the link. But would they have had you not sent these? Would they have gone out on their own? So in this kid's case, when he keeps refusing, and then they just keep upping the stakes, at what point is the culpability of the people hiring more than the person that actually did the killing?
Well, this is true. I mean, one can argue that everybody was culpable in this particular case because this kid wasn't. He probably he may never have gone out to kill somebody. There's really no way to know. I mean, if he was up for it once, then you could argue, it might have been anything at some point in his life would have happened that he might have done it. But considering his age, then I think one could safely say that he was kind of led into it and whatnot. But yeah, I mean, the culpability is pretty much shared. And I think
obviously there's much heavier weight on the person who actually follows through. But if this kid is not that bright, they realize that, and they're taking that person for granted and manipulating them.
Manipulating. Yeah. I mean, I think we've seen many, many cases where people have committed crimes, but they've been heavily manipulated. I mean, this kid in this particular story, I don't think he was that manipulated. I mean, I think it was okay. He was cool with it. But I mean, I think we've seen many cases over the years of people who were manipulated and did have their minds played with harder and harder and harder until they went and did something that maybe they would never have done.
Right. And obviously it seems sad to say that everybody has a price, right? You would think that these are good people who might be a little off, but there's no way that they would commit this murder. But it seems there is a price for everyone. In mine and Tim's case, it just happens to be McRib sandwiches and Twinkies. And, so folks, if you've got somebody in your life, you just need to get rid of dirty deeds done dirt cheap, McRibs and Twinkies. Yeah, Tim and I are
special sale.
That's right.
Two for the price of one.
That's right. Crazy. The book, again, The Best New True Crime Stories, Crimes of Passion, Obsession, and Revenge. We have a link for that book in today's program guide. All right, Mitzi, let's take a look at the book that came out a little bit earlier this year, The Best New True Crime Stories, Well-Mannered Crooks, Rogues, and Criminals. I love that there are some that go into the subset of just, they're very well-mannered, polite criminals. Let's take a deep dive into this. Who was one of your favorite, well-mannered crooks that you highlight in this one?
Oh, my goodness. Well, there's a story in here, some of the criminals in this book, it's almost mind-boggling that they were as successful as they are. I mean, reading about them now, you'd think, oh my God, I wouldn't fall for that. But in the context of the time and the place. But one of the stories that stands out to me is called A One-Way Ticket to Poyais. Which is by Janelle Como, who's a Canadian writer. This is a historical one set in the early 1800s. And it's a brilliant con man. absolutely brilliant, because you have to be pretty brilliant to sell a fake country. And that is essentially what this guy did. He was a Scottish national, and he had aspirations. He wanted to be somebody, he wanted to, be amongst society, so to speak. And, it's a time period where perhaps things in England weren't so great. The Industrial Revolution starting. England's a gritty place. It's gritty. It's grim. So he decided that he found out about this piece of land which is now in like Honduras, and he created this paradise, this bogus paradise, a place where there was like beautiful homes that you would have, a job would be ready for you, just absolute, the ripe fruit on the trees, ripe for picking, scoop up the sand at the beach, it's full of jewels, a complete fantasy. And he sold people on going here. He printed out flyers and whatnot. Come to Poitiers, move to Poitiers. And people were getting on ships, crossing from Britain, going, a hell of a long cruise to, ship to get down there. And they would arrive, and it was just essentially a swamp. There was nothing there. And some people died as a result because they couldn't get back, and more ships were coming with more people. And this guy was just spinning this thing again and again and again and again. And he was just this brilliant con man. I mean, brilliant to the point where he could even get himself military commissions in South America and get in with all these people. His name was Gregor MacGregor, which is this great Scottish name.
A name so nice they gave it to him twice. Huh?
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly. So, he was just very clever. And obviously people weren't, people in England didn't know anything about South and Central America. I mean, this was, to say it was another world, it literally was another world. So they bought into the fantasy, and this guy just kept doing it again and again. And he must have been a sociopath, because he clearly didn't care that people would be arriving on the shores and there was nothing there, and they couldn't even, they couldn't survive, and people would die, and he didn't care. He would do the same thing believe it or not, he would lead military soldiers as well in various things happening in these countries. And same thing, he didn't know anything, and soldiers would be killed, and he just went on to the next thing. A complete sociopath, and a damn smart one, very clever.
Good God. I know, in talking kind of more charming and well-mannered crimes, we did a dumb crime, stupid criminal a number of years back that always cracked me up. This guy went in and held up a convenience store, and really pretty girl working the counter, and she just kind of breaks down while she's like, oh my God, I'm going to lose my job. And she's handing over all this money and talking. And the guy's like, listen, I'm sorry, this is nothing personal. Here. And he gave her his phone number, and he's like, I've just come into a lot of money. We should get together. Like, he's feeling compassion for this poor girl who just lost her job. He just came into a lot of money as I think, robbed her. His big money was about $1,500 and probably a Zagnut bar from this convenience store. But I always just thought that was like charmingly weird. Right?
Yeah.
My heart goes out to you. I'm so sorry this had to happen, but let's get together for dinner later. I'll make it up to you. What the hell? Yeah,
some people just don't seem to quite, like I said, things don't quite hook up right in their brain, obviously. And when especially with the lack of empathy, that's particularly scary. And some of the criminals in this book, they were.
But in this case, this guy had empathy. It was just misguided, right? I mean, Good Lord. He was in a rough spot himself, but he was robbing all these stores around town and had collected quite a nice little bankroll. And then all of a sudden, he's like, hey, things could, let's don't focus on the negative here. I've just come into a lot of money. Let's get together.
Despite all the people that I've ruined.
Come on. That's what insurance is for, right?
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, but this character, Gregor McGregor, I mean, he was even like was trying to sell Florida, I mean, it was just crazy.
How much could you possibly sell Florida for? Everything there wants to kill you or take advantage of you. I think maybe, I don't know, Tim, last time you looked on Zillow, wasn't all of Florida going for about $250 and a bucket of KFC?
Yeah, I believe that's what it was. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Florida, get your shit together, please.
Oh, tell me about it. I used to live there. I know.
Well, you're one of the few that got out. I like that.
Oh, I got out really, really quickly. Yeah. It was one of my priorities in life. Yes.
Yeah. So, Tim, this is the time when people mistake me for Rick from Pawn Stars to be okay because, he's the one that gets the stink eye when he visits Florida because of us putting it down all the time.
Oh, well, yeah. Well, I suppose it's okay for some. It just doesn't. Clearly, it wasn't for us.
No. All right. What's another one of the fun or is funner a word? If not, trademark it, Tim.
No, it's not. No.
All right, we're taking it. Trademarked funner, Darkness Radio. Anybody that uses it, you owe us $0.50. In the book, Well-Mannered Crooks, Rogues, and Criminals, what's another one of your more weird and fun stories?
Oh, my goodness. Weird and fun. Well, okay. I got another one that's historical. I mean, I do have a cross section. I try to encompass, throw in a few historical ones just to kind of even things out. This one is an Australian one, but it's actually quite international. It's called The Prince of Swindlers by Paul Williams, who's an Australian writer, actually a British expat who pretty much made his life in Australia, which so many did. And no, it wasn't when they emptied the prisons. He's too young for that.
Good. But, that was a while back. Yeah,
that was a while back. Yes,
folks, even before MySpace. That's how far back.
Even before, yeah, man, that's really going back then. This one is about a guy. This is another one of these things where you just don't understand how anybody of Mr. Joe Average could just keep having this happen. But this is a guy who's a serial bigamist. And his name was Charles Ernest Chadwick. Maybe. There's no real guarantee that was his name. He had many names and many countries that he moved around with. But this guy had cons where he would basically, he would be known as a doctor. He would get medical practices set up or buy into medical practices. He would marry one woman, then he would, go on to a next destination after his, con ran out, and he'd marry another woman. I've lost track of how many wives he's had in this, but it goes from Australia to South Africa, to England, back and forth. And it's the same thing. The guy just would keep coming out as a so-called doctor, and he would always have a new wife. And the funny thing is he was this really, like I said, nothing that would stop traffic. And yet he kept, women would just keep marrying him. I mean, I don't know how many bigamists out there would accumulate this many wives. I think it may have been 10. I'd have to go and reread the whole story again. But
how the hell? One wears me out. How do you have 10?
Well, he didn't stay with him at the same time. This wasn't Utah.
Utah, please send your emails directly to Mitzi.
No, I love Utah. I've been to Utah. Right. It's fabulous.
Okay.
It's fabulous. And I know that that's only a small sector that does that. But yeah, I mean, this guy would just go from one woman to the next. And having said that, a lot of the women that he married were women that were they were, it would have been harder for them to find a husband. Back in this time, if you were past a certain age, it was literally you were past your sell-by date, as they say. So it's like, here comes this guy and he wants to marry you. You're going to marry him. So this is probably one reason why he found it so easy to marry so many women. But he would keep remaking himself at each destination. He would alter his name slightly, alter his history slightly. He would have forged checks. He was an absolutely brilliant con man, really brilliant. I don't think he is as well known as some of the other con men that, we're familiar with. But Charles Ernest Chadwick was definitely top of the list for con men, and on an international scale, really international, just to go from country to country. And I left out Canada. He also was there too, and the United States.
Wow. So he was touching on all the major ones. That's crazy.
Yeah, real international traveler. That's a fact. And, he'd leave one wife, go to the next, and each country another wife. And, there wasn't like there was any divorces happening. I mean, all these poor women were left with wondering what happened.
So what, again, he gets up to 10. And they're just wondering, do they think he's dead? Is he just like the perfect great pretender? How does this finally come crashing down on him?
Yeah, well, how did it actually crash down on him? I mean, he, like I said, I think it was more so that because of the business with the medical thing, the medical cons. And there's something funny about this because we don't know if he actually had any type of background in medicine. It's possible he worked at an apothecary at one time, but he was not a trained doctor or anything like that. But do you know that there were really no real complaints against his medical skills? People seem to quite be impressed with him. So, I mean, he was a con man, but he was really pretty good when he was able to really at least live up to it a bit. But he did have I think one wife who did serve him with divorce papers in England. But he's like I said, he just it was one of the things that got him in trouble was to do with South Africa. It's all rather complicated, so I mean I can't really like sum up the story because there's so many details in it. It's a long story and it's just very complex. Probably worth 2 reads because it's just so much in here that you'd say, my God, how did all these pieces get fit together? It's incredible.
Right. Well, looking at a story like this, I mean, how do you think somebody does get away with this for so long? Does it become like a challenge almost for these people thinking, good Lord, I could just move from place to place, start over, bleed somebody dry, and then leave them and start all over again?
Well, clearly that's what he was doing. And it doesn't sound like he had any type of bad feeling about it, that he regretted it. I mean, the fact that he would just keep doing it over and over and over, he certainly didn't feel bad about, like I said, going from one wife, marrying one woman, marrying the next, setting up shop as a doctor here. Then, okay, they kind of found out that something's a bit dodgy about my credentials, so I'll go somewhere else and I'll do the same thing. But I think one of the big advantages is you have to look at the time period in which this takes place. Being the 1800s, I don't see that this would be a simple thing to do now. I'm not saying it's impossible because, there's always some, we hear about again and again things where a doctor isn't really who he or she says they are. Same thing with bigamy. It does happen, especially if you cross international borders. It's not that easy to check. But back in this particular time, I mean, you could just go a few miles away and be doing some con, and it doesn't mean you'd even be found out. There was no internet. There was no, all they had would be, say, newspapers. And that would be one downfall here would, he would start getting mentions in newspapers in particular countries. So it was like, okay, I better, get out of here now.
God, that is true, right? I mean, before all of this, before the internet, how easy was it to commit these crimes and just move over to another city, another town, just, another village over and pick up right where you left off with a whole new personality and identity. And I'm betting that even in today's environment with the advent of the internet, it's still pretty easy to get by with some of this for those that are really, I guess, dedicated to that craft.
Yeah. Well, also, again, back to the time, the context of time here, people were more trusting, and unfortunately, I mean, even, okay, now we're a bit, more savvy. However, we still hear about horrible cons being perpetrated against people, and especially the elderly, and as this is still happening now. And perhaps again, when someone is a bit more trusting, maybe they're from another generation where they weren't so suspicious of everything. I find it hard to believe anyone would be alive anymore that would think that way. But again, if that wasn't the case, we wouldn't be hearing about these Nigerian scammers and all this, and they're still doing well. The scams are still happening. They're still getting money from people.
I got a call one day from somebody saying that my computer had been hacked and they were from Microsoft. And
I know, I've had that call.
And he's like, we want to help you. What's quick? Give me your password and your date of birth so we can get in here and lock it. And I just paused and I go, do people really fall for this stupidity? And there's a pause and he's like, yeah, because you fucking Americans are so stupid. And he started laughing at me and he goes, and as long as you morons keep giving us your credit card information and personal information, we're going to keep taking advantage of it. And then he hung up on me. So again,
my God,
the honesty, there's that.
Wow, that's really funny that he actually even communicated about it. Oh, man.
There's no way for me to track him, right? It's one of those kind of deals, but it was just crazy enough that it made me laugh. Very strange. We do have a link up for our guest's website and for her books. So we've got both of the books listed on today's program guide. Mitzi, thank you so much for coming on and shedding a little light on these strange and unusual crimes and criminals.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me. I think we were supposed to be on, I think a year ago we were communicating, right? We finally did it.
Yeah, I'm glad we finally were able to connect. We got a lot of cool stories. And folks, these books are 230 pages long. There's a lot of intricate stories and so much to delve into. We literally scratched the surface today. So make sure you get the books, rate and review them as well so that these books are moved along and more people can find them. All right, Mitzi, thank you so much for joining us and sharing those tales today, and good luck in the future with your next few volumes.
Thank you so much.
All right, kids, for those of you that are subscribers through the premium and commercial free, stay tuned. We've got Dumb Crimes, Stupid Criminals. For those of you that are not, that's okay. We still love you, and we hope you enjoyed today's interview. We'll be back again next week with more of the best in true crime talk radio. That's Tim. I'm Dave. You're listening to True Crime Tuesday. We hope you enjoyed today's program of True Crime Tuesday. And remember, if you'd like the full episode with the Dumb Crimes, Stupid Criminals aspect, all you have to do is go over and subscribe now for Stitcher Premium. Use code word Darkness Radio, all one word, to get some deep discount savings for your 1-year subscription. And it will give you access to all of our archives from Darkness Radio. There's over 1,000 episodes up and available and more being added constantly. You get all of the episodes of True Crime Tuesday, and you get all of the other great programs that are part of Stitcher. Hundreds of thousands of hours of programming for $5 a month, commercial free. You can't beat that, so don't even try. Go subscribe now and remember to use keyword Darkness Radio for those key savings.